It's that time, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to yet another episode of an Evolved Review. I am your host, James Caleb Kitchens, and as always, oh wait, I'm actually not joined by Caleb Stovall today. I'm actually joined by none other than straight from the Tapped Out Wrestling Podcast, Myron. Welcome, man.
Yes, your buddy Myron, my buddy Myron, everybody's buddy Myron is glad to be here. Great episode to talk about today. I am excited to do this, and I am very thankful you asked me to participate.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I'm glad to have you back on the show. After this one, though, I'm gonna have to actually have you on for something that doesn't involve like death or murder or
Yes,
anything.
mental illness, substance abuse.
Yeah,
Yes.
we've developed over time. We've developed a 2-and-1 rule. So, 2 episodes of Dark Side of the Ring, and then we have you on for something happy. Uh, I just recently had my buddy Ace from Superhero Homies on, and he covered the Chris Benoit episodes with us and the Brian Pillman episodes.
Oh,
And so then so I was like, okay, so he came on and covered the Samoa Joe Kurt Angle interview. We did a review of that. Go check it out. Um, and so yeah, so next time you come on, we'll have to have it
excellent,
be
excellent.
something where
Well, yeah, but
you
these
know.
these have a lot of substance, and I enjoy that kind of stuff. I think mental illness is probably one of the biggest detriments to society right now because people don't take it seriously enough or people don't understand it. And if we can do something on here that helps that, I think it'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good message for a lot of these Dark Side of the Ring episodes. Especially like the way that it's viewed in pro wrestling because
Yeah.
I feel like the world is behind on that topic. And then it seems like for whatever reason the wrestling world is always like another decade behind.
Yes.
uh, for various
Yes.
reasons. But before we dig into it, man, I want to give you a second to plug the Tapped Out
Yes.
Wrestling podcast. I'm
Yes.
a patron. I listen to it all the
Thank you.
time. Let everybody who's tuning in right now know what you guys are about and where they can find you.
I am one half of the Tapped Out Wrestling podcast. You can find us everywhere as Tapped Out Pod. Tapped Out Pod is the what Nick has chosen to have us everywhere to be easily found, which is brilliant in my opinion. Every podcast, Facebook, everywhere you would ever look for content, we're there. Tapped.pod.com is our website. We do basically a commentary and question and answer style podcast based on what's going on in wrestling, past and present, and also we like to cover local wrestling to help out keep the scene because if anybody deserves credit, it's the guys out there on the daily basis making the drives and entertaining us. So if you want to watch us, I would look forward to having you join us. If you want to submit questions, anything like that, please do. Also at tapped.outpod.com. And we have a weekly episode every week that's on Facebook and all other platforms.
And one of the things that I really like about you guys is that you cover the national scene, which I know brings a lot of eyes to it.
Yes.
But then you guys also every week you're covering the Georgia indie scene, and you're bringing that wider audience to get a spotlight on Georgia. So,
Yes. Yes.
as a member of that scene, I always want to thank you guys for
Oh,
that.
thank you. Thank you. It's great. It's great to be a part of the Georgia wrestling scene. Everybody is in some form of giant family, whether they want to be in it or not
Right.
in wrestling. Sometimes people want to fight about it and not join, but the more we all work together, the better it is for everyone concerned.
Yeah, I feel right at home, man. It's
Yeah.
about like my family at Thanksgiving.
Yes.
So, you know.
Yes. And that's a lot like the family we're talking about today.
Yeah, that's true, man. I don't know. Between the three, I don't know which one I'd pick, but the first one I'd have to eliminate would probably be this one. So that's right. We're
Yes.
talking about the Vachon family, specifically Luna Vachon, and kind of her journey through the wrestling world and everything that kind of transpired along with that. Um, so we did a season 3 predictions episode last year. Luna didn't make it. As a matter of fact, I've had to kind of eat crow on a few of these because there's a few of them that Caleb had on his list that I didn't have on mine, and I said they'll never do those. And then XPW got covered, and FMW got covered, and I had a few on my list that didn't make it. So,
Yeah.
but neither one of us actually guessed Luna. Kind of, I guess, because she was, I guess, really before our time.
Luna is one of those people where you don't really understand it as a fan unless you watch something like this. I did not know this stuff. I saw her as a performer, and I knew she passed away, but I didn't know all the details, and that was a whole new awakening for me. As someone who got to see her with Bam Bam Bigelow and got to see her just absolutely during the Attitude Era, just being the anti diva type.
Yeah, I remember that. That's kind of what I remember of her. And then I was always a WCW guy growing up, and when she came out with Shawn at WrestleMania Caesar's Palace, I was 6 years old. That was actually it was on my birthday on April
Oh wow.
4th. I would have been turning 6, so I would have been concerned about birthday cake and not WrestleMania. But I did go back and watch that years later, and I was like, "Who is this person?" And I did look her up and kind of do a little research on her then,
Mhm.
but it wasn't anything in depth like this. And I don't know that a lot of this stuff really could have even been found online if you'd have gone looking for it. They probably had to get really into the weeds on some of this to get some of this information.
Yeah, yeah. At last night read the Wikipedia page on Luna, and you could see that a lot of it was filled in from this Dark Side of the Ring episode.
Right. Yeah, and
Yeah, there was a
there's
lot of information.
probably a lot of topics like that,
Yeah.
really, where Dark Side of the Ring filled out most of their Wikipedia page.
Uh,
Let's talk about her family a little bit. We have Mick Foley here. And he doesn't really, in my opinion, contribute a ton of additional information to this episode. But the thing about Mick is, anytime you have him on Dark Side of the Ring, it always brings that his credit and kind of his notoriety to the episode, because
mhm.
Mick Foley is somebody that I think a lot of fans trust his opinion,
Yeah,
and people just generally like Mick.
yeah. I think Mick Foley is also very important to add to a show that's this dark,
Yeah,
because Foley is probably one of the best human beings to ever live, in my opinion. And when you put him in a situation like this where it's dark, he can add that little bit of sunshine. He can add that eulogy he wrote at the end, and kind of explain things better.
yeah,
Uh, hmm,
absolutely. So let's talk a bit. He introduces her family a little bit. So he talks about her dad, Butcher Vachon,
uh-huh.
her uncle, who I would say, other than her, is probably the most well known
Yes.
of the Vachons, and, and
Hmm.
and maybe even more than her in certain circles, which was
Hmm.
Mad Dog
Yeah.
Vachon.
Hmm.
And then her aunt, who I actually was not familiar with, Vivian.
No.
I was not familiar with her at all before this episode.
Well,
Uh,
there's a lot of wrestling that we miss out on that
right,
at the time was a territory type thing. And depending on where you lived in the country, you may not have got the territory. I didn't get anything besides WWE and Continental. So there's stuff, unless the Vachons were coming through Alabama at the time, I did not see them on TV. So I missed out. These are things I've had to fill in later. But
right.
apparently they were the heels.
Yeah, I mean, they talk about it a lot. It's just, that her uncles were incredibly hated, and you have to remember they're from that old school era where, even if there had been social media, these guys wouldn't have been thanking their opponents for the match afterwards.
Yes.
These guys were hated. Everybody, couldn't stand them. Um, and so with Luna, or Gertrude, as her name is, I don't, I think it should be considered abuse just to name your child Gertrude, but
Yeah, that's not a good one.
yeah. Even, they talk about she didn't even like the shortened, Trudy. She
Hmm.
hated both of those. Um, but yeah, I mean, people, picked on her because of her name, and then they found out that that's who her dad and her uncle were, and they hated her even more.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a reverse kind of situation from today. It's like today, if you have a relative who's like a famous pro wrestler, it doesn't matter if they're a heel or a face or whatever.
Yeah.
Most people are going to think that's cool, but back then, I mean, the level of heat was astronomical because people
Yeah,
believed it.
yes, and, I can relate exactly to where they were, later in the show when we get to talking about Kevin Sullivan,
Yeah,
because, oh,
yeah,
he terrified
absolutely.
me as a child.
Yeah, we definitely going to get there and talk about a couple things about Kevin Sullivan.
Mhm,
Um, so one of the first people that we're introduced to on this is Gangrel, which I was actually glad to see him here on this episode. He's one of those people where he's got a lot of stories to tell, and he tells them in a way where you entertained and you want to hear him talk more
mhm,
about it.
mhm.
Um, it seemed like they had sort of a romantic relationship. Is what I kind of got from it. That it started out as just a friendship and then
Yeah.
it became something else.
Yeah, it was a troubled relationship. There was a lot of substance abuse, and it was two people who were in the same place. And if he had to get out of that place in order to survive the relationship. Uh, I don't know how he came out looking in this episode. At times he was favorable. At other times I didn't think he was that favorable at all. It kind of made me uncomfortable. He really like his his parts were very uncomfortable. Uh,
Yeah, there were some uncomfortable parts in here. I don't think he went the distance and like Tommy Dreamered himself at any point.
no.
Um, you know, I don't want to go into that because we've talked about it on this program like
Mhm.
40 times now. Uh, but there were a few times where I don't know. It came across to me like maybe he just knew Luna really well and they had a similar sense of humor.
Mhm.
But to the viewer, it kind of it comes across as like he's making light of an incredibly serious
Yeah.
scenario.
Yeah. This is one of those situations. There was no one who could cast the first stone, really, because nobody was without sin in this. Um, there were a lot of people who touched Luna's life, and I don't know if anyone touched her life in a good way. 100%. There was always a taint of some kind, like introduced to her whenever she was dealing with someone. Uh,
If there's anybody, it's probably Medusa, who we will talk about later.
yes.
I thought that she was absolutely the star of this episode,
Yeah.
as
Medusa
far as
was
the
terrific.
guests. Yeah,
Was terrific.
I would like to hear more from her. But so let's talk about Mula for a second because Mula had her own Dark Side of the Ring episode.
Mm-hmm.
And Luna is kind of one of her victims. They talk about honestly, this episode cast Mula in a worse light, I think, than even her own episode did because you have people on here that have no reason to lie about this. Talking about that she sent Luna out to meet this guy that tried to rape her. There were, people that said that, she would go up to one of the girls and say, "You're sleeping with me tonight."
Yeah.
I mean, just all manner of, just completely unacceptable behavior from Mula
Yeah.
and intimidation too. Gangrel said, these are some of the toughest women maybe in the
Yeah.
country at the time, and he said when she walked in the room that
Yeah.
they were like a little scared puppy, all of them.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I know Mad Max had a personal issue of some kind to grind with Luna, some kind of act, not Luna, Moolah.
Right.
Um, I have remember a couple years ago when the WWE did the Moolah Battle Royal that they were going to have for the women at WrestleMania, then Snickers forced them to cancel it. Uh, I have been close friends with Nigel Sherrod for a few years in the wrestling business, and he knew Moolah and he knew Mae Young, and he started some of the fundraisers and the awareness programs to raise awareness about Moolah because he believed in a totally different person. And from what I have read and what I've talked to him and some others about, there was a very different Moolah. Well, actually, that's not 100% true. There was a different Moolah. Now, the bullying and the taking the money and all that, she took huge portions of their bookings and she controlled women's wrestling. The sexuality stuff, I can't speak to, but then again, most of these people are dead
Right.
and they can't defend themselves in this situation. And I'm not taking Mullah's side. I'm just saying there are people that were on this episode with personal access to grind against Mullah. But
Right. And I hate to take it back to the Tommy Dreamer thing again, but it's
yeah,
like at the end of the day, we weren't there, you
yes,
know. So it's in the same way that he can't say what may or may not have happened between Flair and
mhm,
that flight attendant. We
yes.
were not there, right?
And
So the best
we
we could
really
do,
can't acknowledge it in a laughing way or blow it off. These are serious allegations.
right? They are, and I think as this episode shows,
Mhm.
it's like you said, everybody that Luna came across, whether it was her family,
Mm-hmm.
It was whether it was Moolah, whether it was people that she encountered later down the road, whether it was Vince McMahon. It seemed like everyone that she had
Mm-hmm.
personal or business relationships with took advantage of her in some way.
Definitely. Definitely.
Sometimes in multiple ways.
Yeah.
What did you think about Gangrel in this episode? Like he talked, a little bit about her being abused by her family, and I, the way he talked about it though, it was kind of like he didn't know whether he should be sharing that stuff or not because as we learn from Medusa later on, it's like she was very protective of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think Maxine also talked about that as well, that she
Yeah.
didn't want people to know that she had been taken advantage of like that.
Well, that whole family situation had to have been bizarre. Wrestling at the time was, and wrestling still is, a refuge for different people. They fall in with people and they realize there are other people in wrestling that are different, or wrestling that are artistic, or whatever they find in wrestling. It's almost like a refuge for freaks and people. I mean, I hate to say that, but at the time they were taken advantage of. A lot of people got taken advantage of in the wrestling business. We've heard the horror stories. Hopefully that's something that doesn't exist anymore, you know, but
I
they
wish that
fell
were
in.
the case.
Yeah,
I do.
we see it. We hear about things. But she fell in with bad people. Um, Male wrestlers around the house is what they said. Maybe her aunt's what they said. I can't comment on this stuff, but it was everything that they mentioned was very traumatic and very disturbing. Uh,
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to imagine that a lot of her mental issues were not derived from exactly this kind of abuse at home, and then when
well, they
she
didn't
got into
help.
wrestling training. Yeah,
Best
definitely
thing,
not.
best thing ever. They didn't help. This girl was she was born this way. She apparently had gone to Emory while she was in Atlanta as a small child for some studies of her mental health. Um, and then she was put into a situation that basically was never safe for her in
Right.
some manner. She was never given to the ability to not be in stress or trauma her entire life. And it's what she turned out like.
Yeah. Now they actually had her dad on here for a very brief uh, bit. I don't know if maybe they were interviewing him thinking they were going to kind of get more out of him, or they got him there and he seemed like he could barely speak.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess maybe they interviewed him and then they were like, well, we brought him here. We
We
might
got
as
this
well put him in
footage.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't do any good. I mean, he didn't do any good for the story as far as positivity, in my opinion.
And
Uh,
well, I thought it was odd because you have these people making all these allegations about her family home life,
mm,
and then it's like he's like, "Hey, I'm Luna's dad." You know, he does tell the story about adopting her, and so
mhm.
I thought that that's what he contributed to the episode.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the basically the backstory, and that's really all he got. He did not come off as a sympathetic person. He did not come off as the kind of person you would trust or believe in what they were saying, in my opinion. Uh,
Agreed.
that might be the old wrestling type people. So,
Well, he was a heel,
mhm.
for his
Yeah,
entire career. Sometimes that's just who you are underneath, and then
mhm.
sometimes
Yeah,
you kind of become that after
yeah, yeah.
the you and the mask become the same person eventually.
I understand that.
Um,
Hmm.
but with him, I liked his story about him adopting her because it really played into this kind of idea that she's always been this outsider her whole
Hmm.
life,
Hmm.
and also that her life was full of tragedy from 4 years old.
Hmm.
You know,
And even
uh,
after he got divorced from her mother and still maintained custody of her.
right,
So,
which is admirable.
mm,
And also too, her birth father committed suicide, so
yeah.
it sounds like there is probably a history of mental
Hmm.
health issues in the family.
Hmm. Hmm. Definitely. Uh, no one really let this child grow up. And she was always put in a position where She was fighting. She never got a good start, and it's sad to see the way things turned out. But I don't think she was ever given a fair chance, and
Right.
that was sad.
Yeah. I agree. And that apply and that really honestly applies in wrestling and just in her
Mm,
personal life.
hmm hmm
Um, so I want to talk about Mad Max here, and then we'll kind of go forward into the Kevin Sullivan era of
hmm
things.
hmm
So we had Janine Mihoset. I think that's how you say the last name. Anyway, Mad Maxine.
hmm
Um, she talked about how Moolah took advantage of Luna, and Luna's family
hmm
originally tried to talk her out of the wrestling business because they knew
Yes.
how difficult that it was. She tells the story about Moolah sending her out to the
Yes.
photographer who had tried to attack her.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, driving across the country, you know, with the goal of getting paid $500. This is probably in what, the late '80s. I mean, $500 was
Yeah.
a lot more money than it is
Yeah.
today.
Definitely. Definitely.
You know, um, what did you think about her commentary here? I know you said that she did kind of have an axe to grind with Moolah.
Yeah. Well, you needed these people. Okay. You needed these contemporaries. She toured with Mad Max on a 4-girl wrestling troupe. And Moolah, since Moolah had all the booking for all the women wrestlers in the country, this is where they got their women wrestlers at. And I don't know, it was good to see the context, having Mad Max in there. Penelope Paradise, didn't really care for her from what I got out of her. But Mad Max was the one that was trying to give a bit of like substance to what was going on in the wrestling world at the time. I don't know if she had too much of a personal vendetta to give it, without a lot of color on it, but she was an interesting character.
Yeah, agreed. Um, her son is in the episode too.
Mm, that
Van
was
Herd.
that was difficult.
It
That
it
was
was
extremely difficult.
it was difficult, and I recognized him for a minute, and I was like, I know this guy from
Hmm.
somewhere. He was on multiple seasons of Hell's Kitchen.
Yes.
So,
Hmm.
and he looks like a chef.
Yeah.
you know,
Hmm.
that's what kind of led me to it. But I was glad that we got his commentary here. It really seems like she was barely involved in his life. It's like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
he mentions that she would never even go to meet her granddaughter.
Yeah. And that was a situation uh, where I don't know if it was a mental illness or being ashamed of what she'd never put in there. And one of the things in her heartbreak was she gave everything, including her family, to get one thing, and she never accomplished it. Now, in retrospect, after her passing, she has made a huge contribution to women's wrestling, but she never lived to see it.
Right.
She never got to acknowledge it, and she did sacrifice her family, which is probably different because male wrestlers were doing the exact same thing. It was
Right.
different because she was a female wrestler, and people weren't expecting, would expect women in that time to do something like that.
Yeah. I agree entirely. And that's kind of a recurring theme here is that she was never allowed to do the things that the boys were doing.
Hmm.
It was always a different standard back then, and I mean it is to an extent even now, um, unfortunately. But
Hmm.
things are getting better. Um, so let's talk about the Kevin Sullivan era for a bit, because this is where we really see Luna come to
Yes.
life.
Hmm.
Um, so tell us a little bit about Kevin Sullivan in this era.
Kevin Sullivan, you either believed he was the devil, he worshiped the devil, he could bring the devil to come see you, he could invoke the devil in a wrestling match. And growing up in Alabama in the 1980s, and during the Satanic Panic, which I barely survived because I occasionally played a game of Dungeons and Dragons or something like that, or listened to rock and roll music sometimes. Um, Kevin Sullivan scared the living hell out of you. Kevin Sullivan was the closest thing to evil you'd probably ever seen. And he was convincing. He was so convincing. And when he brought her in and he converted her from that innocent reporter into to Luna, that's when you saw her character develop right there. And she was formed around these people who were scary. She learned how to be scary from the start. She was working in women's wrestling. She was with Woman, who was one of the greatest valets, greatest female wrestling people ever. Um, I met someone a couple years ago at WrestleCade that was talking about being around that time period and knowing all those people. And she said the only one that was ever nasty to her was Purple Haze
Right.
as a fan, and he had struck her. So she was not around the choicest people on earth.
Right.
Okay. And it was a crazy time where, especially in Florida, where the drugs were flowing freely. So here's someone who's always had mental illness, and now they've got a just an absolute endless supply of street drugs that will make them feel a little better.
Yep. The quote in the episode is, "It snows in Miami every
Yes,
day."
yes, yes. And that time period had to have been crazy.
Yeah, I
Had to have been
mean,
crazy.
you really can't blame her too, I think, for really attaching herself to these folks, because this was the first place where she is able to explore and develop a character
Mm-hmm.
and is really excelling at what she's doing, both not only in the ring but also as a character.
Yes.
And you talked about how Kevin Sullivan had this, cult leader like persona,
Mm-hmm.
and there had to have been a certain magnetism to that, even, that was not a work.
No, no. I met him a couple years at WrestleCade briefly, and I was like, "You scared the hell out of me as a child, sir." That's all I could say to him because
So I
even
gotta
as an old
ask it
man,
next. What do you think that they don't, they didn't say, but do you think he was contacted for this episode? And if so, why do you think he chose not to appear?
was he in the Benoit episode?
He was not. He was mentioned in it heavily, and I
Well,
think in the Benoit episode, and this is kind of what I wanted to get to. I think they do mention in that one that they contacted him for comment, and he did not, and he
it's
refused.
probably best for him he stayed out of it. I'll be honest with you. Eh, he has been he was a recluse for a little bit out there in Seattle somewhere on an island. He's coming out now to do more appearances and things, but and work with more wrestling stuff, but there's no way for him to look good.
Right.
Whether it's this episode or Benoit, there's no way for him to look good in it.
Right. I agree. And, there was a large contingent of fans, and there probably is still a small contingent. Because when the Benoit episodes came out, it's like there were a lot of people that were huge fans of his that just cognitive dissonance for whatever
Yeah,
reason did not want to believe it. And I was in that
yeah,
category of like, there's just no way the man did this. After you watch the Dark Side of the Ring
yeah.
episodes, it's like, if you still think that he didn't do it, then you're on another planet somewhere.
Whoa, hold on. Where are we getting into with this?
What's that?
You think Kevin Sullivan killed him?
No, 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 no.
Okay.
Benoit. No, no, no. There's people that don't think that Benoit committed the murders,
Oh
but
yeah,
there was a large contingent of people that thought Kevin Sullivan was involved in the situation before Dark Side of the Ring
well,
came
even
out.
even with the Dark Side of the Ring, I will tell you something. It's easy to believe Kevin Sullivan could have done it because me seeing Kevin Sullivan when he was being evil, that would be the kind of person that would murder these people.
Right,
I could believe. I know it's not true, but if you told me he did it, I'm like, okay, yeah, okay, makes sense. He's
right, and I
evil.
think that played into it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's always that sort of people want to take the on-screen persona and
Mm-hmm.
attach it to who that person really is, and sometimes they are close,
Yeah,
but sometimes they couldn't be more different.
yeah,
And and I don't know Kevin Sullivan personally, so I can't really comment on that with him. But I do think that the Benoit episodes probably at least enlightened him that maybe I shouldn't be on this either,
no,
because I don't think he would have looked nearly as bad here. I think he may have actually had a positive influence on her career, but once again, it's like now you kind of have to be careful if you go on Dark Side of the Ring. Like if you go on Dark Side of the
no, there's no,
Ring,
yeah. Oh God, no.
you have to be squeaky clean.
Yes, yes. There's no
So
way. There's no way as a wrestler that might have something to hide, you should go on the show. And that's sad because I love the show, but they get it out. They pull this stuff out,
right.
and they're not done. There's still a lot of stuff in wrestling they can cover.
Oh, and they will, and I think we'll continue to get these expanded seasons. But I do think after this season, after the plane ride from hell episode, I think they will have harder and harder times getting a hold of people to come on and talk. I think they'll still manage to do it. But one of the things that I've talked about a few times that as a result of that episode, Ric Flair's not under contract with WWE anymore.
Mm-mm.
But and so I thought, after that, after he was no longer under contract, that maybe we would get him on some of these Dark Side of the Ring episodes because he has a million stories.
Mm-hmm.
But as a result of that episode, I don't
No,
think that's going to happen.
no. Well, Rick is crazy,
Right.
and Rick actually lives around close near to me. Uh, Apparently sits in a Frontera and drinks over there on Sugarloaf Parkway a good bit, but that's just what I've been told. Uh, it's a we didn't know this stuff. Okay, we know a lot of stuff now with social media and everything else. We
Right.
didn't know this stuff was going on.
Right.
We
Yeah.
saw it on television, or at best, we got a Pro Wrestling Illustrated and read a story about it that was made up.
Right.
Okay, most of the stuff that Bill Apter was publishing was fiction about a fictionalized business.
Right.
So we didn't know this stuff. We didn't know who was hurting other people, who was doing drugs, and now it's all coming out. Now nowadays you just find out the moment they see somebody with a pipe in their hands. It's on television. That's all over Facebook. But these days, I don't know, man. It's almost like it's not. Well, it's that double edged sword. Do you want to know about this stuff automatically, or just want to pretend and watch the kayfabe? And if you watch that Kevin Sullivan promo where they shave Luna's head, that was real. That was very visceral. That you could feel Kevin Sullivan's voice coming through on that, and you don't get that today because you know everything.
Right. Yeah.
Kayfabe's dead.
Yeah. I mean, you look at MJF, and he's one of the few examples
Yes.
where you won't see him out there, breaking kayfabe.
Hmm.
But I mean, that's like I said, that's one of the very few examples.
Yeah.
The majority of people, there's always somewhere, to see them doing something,
Hmm.
and where they're not going to be in character. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of the reality of today. But also, we can expose the people that are,
Yes.
that are predators in wrestling
Yes.
and get them
Yes.
out a lot faster,
Yes.
before it turns into these sorts of situations.
Definitely. Definitely. So hopefully it's for the best. And we were talking earlier, Kylie Ray, who has mental health issues and comes in and out. Apparently, she was getting into a bad place and was using alcohol and marijuana to medicate, and now she's back out of wrestling again. Well, had Kylie Ray been out there and got in with some of these people, would have been cocaine and placidil.
Right.
You
I
know,
mean, yeah. I mean, she would, Dark Side of the Ring season 13.
she's freer to say, "I'm having an issue. I need to step away." I don't think she's receiving adequate treatment, or maybe she could. But the thing is, she's able to see this and not get caught up in groups of people with cocaine and all the stuff Gangrel, eight balls that Gangrel was talking about. Uh, Maybe it's for the best. I would hope that people are more apt to go get mental health care after watching something like this.
Right. And today, there's been a lot of people, including myself, that have, kind of talked smack about, Adam Page, kind of taking off 2 months in the middle of his world title run,
Hmm.
or not run, but chase,
Hmm.
to go be a father. That would have
Yeah.
never happened in the late 80s.
No.
They would have said, you're going to be at TV or you're gone.
Yes.
you know and
Yeah.
so it is good to see that in wrestling today, where people aren't in that mentality of, if I'm not on television every single week, my spot's gone. I have to stay relevant,
Yeah.
at any cost to my body, my family,
Yeah.
etc. So I am glad that the wrestling world is growing in that way. um So a lot of the stuff about Kevin Sullivan, her time in Florida, we see this through the eyes of Kim Sachs, aka Penelope Paradise.
Uh,
What did you think about her kind of commentary here on Luna's life?
it was strange because uh, the part where she said what Luna would want for her funeral, and then her son was like, "No, that's not at all."
Yeah.
Did those people know different Lunas?
Well, and
Okay,
there were different Lunas. There were
yeah,
several different Lunas
yeah,
apparently.
which is sad. I didn't. She didn't come off as a. I don't know. You've dealt with older wrestling people. Sometimes it's hard not to for them not to come off greasy or
Yeah.
as con men. I wasn't. She didn't appeal to me as a human being. In my just off the top of my head, I don't know what I assure you, a lot of what she said was true, but it may have been. You know, was she not doing the drugs too? Was she
Right.
not part of some of that behavior?
Yeah, she talks about her taking 100 pills a day.
That's Kurt Angle numbers.
That is absolute madness
Mm-hmm.
to me.
Mm-hmm.
As like, I like just me personally, like if I get surgery or something and they prescribe painkillers to me, I want to be off of them as soon as possible. I hate
Yes.
the way that they, one makes me feel.
Yes.
So yeah, I just can't even imagine somebody taking 100 pills a day and still being in a condition to wrestle. You know,
As a pharmacist for 23 years, I have seen some shit.
I bet you have.
Uh,
I could only imagine.
uh, there's some HIPAA wrestling stories in there too, but HIPAA.
Right, of course,
I
of course.
protect it like kayfabe, but it was unbelievable. But when you consider someone with untreated schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, who's probably wide ass open and bringing in enough cocaine to just keep running, the pills will bounce off some of that stuff. You know?
And if anybody's listening or watching and would like to hear more about pro wrestlers abusing drugs, tune in next week to our episode about the steroid trial.
Yes. I haven't
That-
watched that episode yet. I'm looking forward to that, definitely.
It's probably it might be my favorite episode. It's definitely
Oh.
my favorite episode in the second half of
Hmm.
season 3. I don't know about the whole season, but I really, really loved that episode. So Caleb and I are going to cover that maybe later on this week because I know
Hmm.
we got a ton of episodes lined up, and I know we're definitely trying to wrap Dark Side of the Ring up since the season's over now.
Yeah,
So stay
definitely.
tuned for that one, folks. I want to get to the star here. I want to talk about Medusa. I've
Hmm.
not seen her since I think since like she was hanging out in the asylum with Ric Flair on Nitro when they had him committed. I think that's the last time I saw her. Deborah and Michelle, if
Hmm.
I may be
Hmm.
pronouncing that wrong, but um, yeah, as we know her, Medusa. I thought she was incredible in this episode.
Yes. Yeah. Very well spoken. An advocate, someone who you felt you could trust, someone who seemed upright. Everything I've never heard bad stuff about Medusa.
Right.
Listen to Tony Schiavone and some of the other people. Everyone's always, even Cornette, good things about her.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, and you could see why. I mean, she was very professional.
mhm.
Um, she came across a lot like I think Stephanie McMahon wants to come across
Yeah.
a lot of times.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, she talked a lot about the industry back then, and I thought
Hmm.
she was an incredible insight into that because
Yes.
she's obviously a very talented person,
Hmm.
and she talks about how the women weren't on the flyers, they weren't really given storylines, if any, and if they were given some, they were, usually, they were stupid, something like
Yeah.
what you would see on WWE right now. Uh, um, let's see. She talked about how they weren't on the marquee, like I said. In the indies, we
Hmm.
call it also appearing.
Yeah.
That's the indie terminology. You never want to be in also appearing. Um, I really liked what she had to say here. She tells a story about how when she was the WWE champion,
Hmm.
WWF at the time, she was gonna wrestle Luna, and she wanted her to she wanted her to pin her and win the title completely off script,
Yeah.
which I thought was incredible because clearly she deserved it and was being
Mm-hmm.
completely overlooked by the WWF.
Mm-hmm. But Luna was a company. I mean, all the all the bad things that happened, she was not going to go against kayfabe. She was not going to go against the company on that situation. It's
That's
a
an
hard,
incredible dedication to the business.
yeah, yeah. And I don't think that exists anymore. And that might be a good thing.
I think it is to an extent. I you obviously don't want to see people putting themselves in harm's way
Mm,
for the business, but you also, on the other hand, you don't want to see them, going into business for themselves either. So
yeah.
there's a fine line of professionalism there.
Mm-hmm.
When does professionalism cross over into being subservience, or when does it cross
Yeah.
over into being, you're just looking out for yourself at the expense of the
Well,
show?
that's one thing I've always thought Brock Lesnar was so intriguing about. He always seems like he could go off at any minute and
Yeah.
go off script or go into business for himself, and that makes him more intriguing. You want to pay more attention. Somebody could do that, but in the real world, you don't want that happening at all.
Right. I mean, yeah, it was the same way with Undertaker
Mm-hmm.
in his prime. Especially when he was doing the whole American Badass thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like this guy. I mean, if he wants to, he can just beat the tar out of you and leave you in
Mm-hmm.
the ring.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that being said, what did you think about Medusa here and what she had to say?
I thought Medusa was lovely. Um, I think Medusa probably was the first vocal women's wrestler. Wendy Richter came before her. Wendy Richter had her famous problems with Moolah in the WWE. But Medusa is in a position where she has been a verbal advocate. She talks. She's an attractive woman. She drove monster trucks, for Christ's sake. Um, she's always been around performing business, and I think she could come back right now and be like a commissioner from a women's division or something like that on a larger, not for any smaller federation, for WWE, AEW, something like that. Wherever she goes, she brings credibility. I would love to see her back on AEW or something like that.
Well, one of the great things about AEW, they are very in tune with the popularity of Dark Side of the Ring.
Yeah.
They even, involved Brian Pillman's aunt
Mm-hmm.
in the kind of the storyline with him and MJF, which I thought was fantastic because
Mm-hmm.
everyone knew about it. Everyone had
Mm-hmm.
watched those episodes, and that really caused them to push Pillman Jr. as a single star.
Yes.
So I like that they have their finger on the pulse for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we get to this point with Luna where she ends up, actually spending some time in rehab because when she was in WWF, she made her debut at WrestleMania, which had to have been an incredible high.
Oh
But for
God, imagine
somebody,
that.
right, but for somebody with these issues, you're now then constantly trying to get that same dopamine hit. You're
Yeah, that
trying to
chasing that
get to that,
dragon.
exactly,
Mm-hmm.
probably literally in this case.
Yeah.
So we get to that point where things escalate to her. She can't get to that high again, at least not without medication. And things get really bad. She does spend some time in rehab, and then she ends up going to ECW,
Yeah.
which I agree with the commentary in the episode. She was perfect for.
Yeah, I wish I would have got to see this run. This is something I was not really aware of. The match with Stevie Richards, I would have loved to seen. I'm not an intergender wrestling fan, but Luna was one of those rare characters that could make me an intergender wrestling fan because she was such a legit badass.
Right, it is believable. I mean, the
Yeah.
same way it was believable with China. I mean,
Yes.
with when her and Eddie had their,
Yeah.
their run, it was
Hmm.
like, yeah, I mean, you can completely believe this.
I didn't know Luna had a match with Jeff Jarrett in WWE also.
I didn't know that either,
Yeah.
which is, I think it was probably great. I haven't watched the match,
No. But just
but
think, I mean, she was legitimate in there in that match. She got color. I saw the footage that on Dark Side of the Ring. That was when ECW was so raw and so original, and everybody wanted to be a part of it. She was in a feud. She did the whole feud. She became Tommy Dreamer's valet for a little while. Uh, God, that was a hot time in wrestling. The episodes were phenomenal. I still remember occasionally finding them on late night television when I was in college.
Yeah.
I loved them.
I really didn't get into the ECW bandwagon probably until WWE resurrected it, and then I
Uh,
wanted to see what all the hype was about, and so
yeah,
I went and checked a lot of it out. Um, so we go forward here. They bring her back into WWE because the Attitude Era is kicked off, and they
yeah,
want people, in leather and chains and legit badasses and whatnot. And then for the women though, that kind of changes. They WWE just kind
yeah.
of decides that they don't really care if you can wrestle or not, or even the quality of the women's wrestling they have on the show. They just need you to be attractive.
Yeah, I remember that period. I remember that time period. I was watching intently, not just for I watched I love the wrestling part, but the women were very, very showy at all times. Terry Runnels would lean out over the ring ropes and expose those massive silicone globes of hers. Uh, well, I mean, how do you describe them?
I mean,
They're
yeah,
not breasts.
for science. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You got Sable, who never was believable
Right.
at all
Right.
as a wrestler. You could, I mean, not even by in no capacity was Sable believable as a wrestler, but she was handpicked because of Vince and it was what was his name? God, I can't even remember his name. Just Cornette insulting him so much.
Was that Johnny Ace?
No,
Bruce
um,
Pritchard?
no, his Cornette's arch rival. God,
Oh,
my brain.
Russo.
Russo
Russo.
was there. Yeah, they got hard-ons for Sable, and they put her into this position, and it was huge for ratings. I mean, people watched wrestling back then,
Right.
but it wasn't. That was just not believable. It was horrible. Luna was one of the first. She was actually the second woman in PWI top
Right.
500, behind Miss Texas, who went on to be oh, what was her name? Jacqueline.
Yeah.
Jacqueline
Right.
was in there too because she was also a legit badass. Um,
Still is.
yes, it was a different time in wrestling. Uh, it did so much damage to women's wrestling that it's taken everything to happen now to get it back out. I think now we're getting to the point where women's wrestling is finally getting. I mean, I know they said they've been out of the Divas era for a while, but I don't think they've been out 100%. Just because of the Sable stuff. The Sable stuff will be looked upon as some of the worst shit ever to happen to women's wrestling, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, in relation to Luna, I
Yeah,
mean, this sort of was the start of her ultimate downfall.
yeah,
When she has this Mania match, she's carrying Sable, who couldn't wrestle her way out of a paper
yes,
bag. And Vince McMahon tells her that she's fired if she leaves a mark on her.
yeah,
I mean, just ridiculousness. And then she goes out there, does it, puts her over, and then nobody even gives her a pat on the back for it.
yeah. Except for Sonny.
Yeah, right. That whole thing.
That was a very sad part to me when that happened. That everyone knew she was the one that did. Everyone that ever been to a wrestling match knew that she was the one that carried Sable. Everyone in the back room, in the back, knew she carried Sable through all that, and they weren't. They were just so fixated on Sable, and
Which I don't get. I was never like intrigued by her at all.
no, she was too fake to be intrigued with.
Right.
She was like a parade float. I
Yeah.
mean, seriously, she would grab your attention, but she was artificial, top to bottom. She couldn't do anything.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of the Vince McMahon MO. I mean that's
Yeah,
what he was looking for at that time, and
yeah,
still to an extent I think is today.
yeah.
Um, you know, so
Just
we just less,
yeah, we got
or
to
at
get
least he can't
Paul.
get
We
away
got
with
to
it.
get Paul back.
Yeah,
Pray for Triple H. He's our only hope.
I agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, even NXT is ruined now.
um, it's so different now.
It
It's
is.
um, God,
Well,
it
I
used to be
I
wrestling.
I tuned back in because they brought Joe back and he won the title and everything, and I'm a huge Samoa Joe mark.
Yeah, yeah,
And then he was gone again, and then here we are. So it's unfortunate. Uh,
yeah,
so that being said, we move on to kind of the last straw for Luna is she's in one of these what's now a very cringe-worthy segment on Raw where she's expected to take her top off,
yeah.
and she refuses to do so,
Hmm.
and that led to her firing by WWE. Um, although I'm sure that that's not what they
No, they
officially
didn't fire
said
at
the
the
reason.
same time. They waited a couple weeks or a couple days. Now, I missed where she got the implants along this course.
Yeah, I don't know if they really talked about that in the episode, but
And
it
I'm not, I
definitely
mean,
happened.
not for just bizarre. The thing is, that's an evolution in women's wrestling with the WWE even today when they
Right.
bring them up if they get the implants or not.
Yeah, they had
And
to have him back then, though.
yeah, and I didn't know if that was something that the WWE sponsored for her or she got while she was out on the independents because that's usually a commitment, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Stacy Keebler was one of like the few people they let get away with not
yeah,
not getting them.
yeah,
So let's see what else we got here. There's not really a lot left. They talk with her son a bit, and then they talk about her unfortunate death. Um, and Mick Foley gets super emotional talking about this,
yeah.
which is understandable because they had apparently grown pretty close. And the official cause of death is not really known, whether it was an intentional overdose, an accidental overdose, uh, you know, purely just her choking or something like
Well,
that.
how do you know? How do you
Right.
really know if they meant to and why? I mean, just it's immaterial whether she meant to or not. She passed away. She passed away and left two children or young men and a grandchild she never got to meet. Um, that's sad. The
Yeah.
sad, the legacy she left behind in women's wrestling was something she never would get to see. She never saw that. She made significant changes, and if you look at women's wrestling now in the WWE and everywhere, do you think people like Jessica Havoc could exist without Luna existing first?
No, I don't think so. And Medusa even talks about it too. It's
Yeah,
like she would have really loved today's
yeah,
product. She was about 20 years too early,
yeah.
because she would have been a force to be reckoned with today.
And she died about the same age as I am now. And when I think about stuff like that, uh, it's kind of scary, because
Right.
you got to deal with what am I going to leave back, uh, and you think about your own legacy, and it gets sad to think about someone who was so passionate about something and cared so much about something and wanted to change one thing and put her entire life into it, and she didn't get to see it. Did she fail? No, she didn't fail. She made significant changes in women's wrestling forever, but mm,
But hey, man, the women's revolution, quote unquote, is gonna, they're doing everything they can to make sure that's credited to Stephanie McMahon, who, if you think about it, did absolutely nothing.
I agree.
So
I agree. Well, you're not ever going to get credit for changing wrestling in the WE unless your name is McMahon.
that's true.
That's just the way it is.
That's
Uh,
absolutely true.
that's why I find myself not watching. I mean, I hate to be that guy. I find myself not watching the product like I used to.
Yeah,
I
I,
find
I
myself,
I don't watch it at all. Ever since uh the Owen Hart Dark Side of the Ring, that was like the last straw for me as far as even trying to follow them. But I mean, the product just isn't for me
no.
anymore.
Well, that's the thing. I'm 49. I'm on my last year at the top of the what's oh
The
god, my
demo.
brain demo. I'm falling out of the demo. I'm aging out of the demo. This is my last year where wrestling might look appealing to me. I don't know what I'm going to do
You
when I
don't
hit
even
50.
matter to Tony Khan after
No,
after you.
no. He's not even interested in me. So I keep finding myself watching Impact. But how much has Dark Side of the Ring changed your wrestling viewing or fanship?
I'd say a bit. Not a ton because a lot of this stuff I knew about. Um, there are people that I have a more negative view on than they're portrayed on Dark Side of the Ring.
Yeah,
Sabu is an instance of that.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I keep being shocked every time I see Sabu on Dark Side of the Ring, and it's not about him yet.
yeah. That's going to be bad when it hits on him, and he's still going to appear on it. That's the bad part.
It depends on if they do it before he dies,
Yeah.
or not. Um, but do they do an episode, um, for him alone? Do they do a Melissa Coates episode?
Oh God.
I don't know, but that whole thing is incredibly tragic.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I saw him make an appearance down in South Georgia 4 or 5 years ago, and I was absolutely just stunned.
yeah, we actually, when I worked for Flatline Pro, he had emailed us and wanted to come in and work a show, and we said, well, if you want to come in and like do an autograph signing appearance, we'd be okay with that. Because I really didn't trust at that point in time. I really didn't trust him in the ring with any of our talent. And yeah, that whole interaction, it was just like this guy, seeing the two of them interact when there's not a camera on
Yeah,
was absolutely like I'll never forget it.
yeah.
So that episode is coming.
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of things with Dark Side of the Ring where we've only been given the WWE
Yeah,
spin for
yeah,
years and years and years. The Montreal Screwjob is a good example.
yeah,
If you watch the WWE version of it from like the early 2000s, it's like, who is this Bret Hart guy? What an asshole.
yeah,
But
yeah.
if you watch the Dark Side of the Ring version, it's like some of this stuff is a lot more believable, and it kind of does not make Sean look like the good guy. It does not
No,
cast him in a positive light
no,
at all,
no,
or the company.
no. I agree 100%. I've always been a huge Cornette fan. I've had to tune out on Cornette recently because negativity. I mean, it just got to the point negativity is too much, especially in this last couple of years. But I knew these things from him, and then having Bruce Pritchard corroborate a lot of stuff. Uh, but when you get it on Dark Side of the Ring, it's in a format that you don't have to go out there and dig as a wrestling fan for. That you don't have to hang out at indie shows, or you don't have to wait on an autograph at a big show to find out this kind of thing, or lark a fan fest. And I think they've done a great job exposing a lot of stuff. You can't say they portrayed wrestling in a negative way when all they've done is given an accurate portrayal of wrestling.
Right.
They didn't ever set out to do a hit piece on wrestling. They just exposed some horrible stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. Correct. I couldn't agree more. I've kind of tuned Cornette out myself a little bit lately,
yeah,
just because I think he's in a situation now where there's a large portion of his audience that wants him to shit on AEW,
that's all they
right?
want. Yeah,
And it's just like, well, I was completely on board with that when the shows were bad,
yeah.
but now I think generally it's I think Dynamite's the best wrestling product on TV.
It's improved dramatically. They've done so much as far as character development. They made me like Kenny Omega as a heel, which
Yeah,
I
I won't,
never
and I
thought
won't
would
even
happen.
go that far.
Yeah, I've never thought that would happen. But they've done a lot, and yeah, fuck Joey Janela.
Right, of
You
course.
know, I'm not going to watch him wrestle voluntarily, but the rest of the stuff has come along. And if that's all you do is just, if your existence is just shitting on one thing, that's all it was turning. It was just reviews. And what the fuck? I'll watch the program instead of getting a review because I can watch the program and tell you what he'd hate. I could write
Right,
that. If you listen to Cornette anytime, you can tell what he's going to hate. But he is that's the thing. His program had turned away from old wrestling information, just vaults and vaults of old wrestling information to that kind of stuff. And it just wasn't appealing anymore.
right. But there's obviously an audience out there for it, and
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
now he's catering to that audience.
Yeah.
So and if enough people tune it out, then I guess he'll change gears again.
Yeah.
So, well, man, you got any other final thoughts on this before we wrap it up?
I'm glad I watched this, and I watched it when I was in the hospital on my iPad, and it didn't do it justice. Last night I sat down here and watched it at my desk and teared up. There were parts of it that were difficult, and wrestling evokes a feeling. I wouldn't feel this way about Hollywood stars or rock stars because these people touch my life in some form, and it was a very powerful episode. I thank you for having me on. I hope we've done something to lower the threshold of people seeking mental health advice or mental health treatment. I personally go to therapy on a regular basis. I am on medication for my depression. It's made a huge difference in my life. I will talk to anybody about that. Don't become. I mean, if you're in a situation, don't become Luna, people.
Right.
It's sad to see somebody you may love and cherish go down the wrong path because they don't get the help they need. It's not hard in 2021 to get mental health help. And if you don't know how to do it, ask somebody. I'll talk to you about it. I'm sure you will talk to people about it. If they have
Absolutely.
any questions, just ask. Just ask people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
And everybody out there, definitely check out the Tapped Out
Thank
Wrestling
you.
podcast.
Thank you.
Like I said, I've been a patron for a long time.
Thank you. Always
Uh,
appreciate that.
I always, I get the episodes early, so I got the sneak peek. I get to know what you guys are going to say about me before everybody else finds
Well,
out.
you typically review fairly well with most of your stuff lately. I think you've turned some corners.
That is true. That is true. Just wait, just wait.
Oh, always a pleasure to talk about what y'all are doing at Viral Pro. I think wrestling is Georgia is better off with y'all in it. Okay,
Well,
and that's the best compliment I can give you. Your production value and the fact that y'all are continually putting out a good positive product that helps the indie wrestling scene is good to have.
yeah, man, I always appreciate that.
Thank you.
We love the feedback, positive or negative, but
Yes.
if it's going to be positive, that's even better. As long as it's honest and I,
Yes.
you guys
Nick's
always,
a sellout. I'm the guy that talks the truth, says the truth.
hey, Nick will call it right down the middle, but I'll get that in my inbox.
Oh yeah.
He'll at least save the beating for the inbox and not the episode. Well, that being said, that's all we got,
Thanks, man.
folks. Definitely check us out anywhere that you can find your podcasts. We're on all the audio platforms. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. And this has been an Evolved Review.